Welcome to Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. The reason I wanted to do this, and by the way, this doesn't stop the radio show Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m., doesn't stop all the social media stuff I'm doing and all the interviews that I've been doing. But I wanted to do this podcast because this sort of was in the works for about 20 years. And here's what I mean. 20 years ago, I actually left my contract early doing television news in upstate New York, Albany, Schenectady, Detroit, WRGB, the CBS affiliate. I was the 6 and 11 o'clock main anchor. I'd been doing television news about 15 years by then, and I'd been in the business of broadcasting since 1989. But what I didn't like is that I was stifled. I wasn't able to give an opinion. I wasn't able to correct some of the incorrect things the producers were writing and the writers were writing. Mostly we did a great job, but I wanted to have the leeway to give the opinion that I have on actual news stories that I knew how to report. I've won dozens of awards of excellence for journalism. I know how to do that job. The so-called journalists today aren't doing the job. And because I was telling the truth in my radio show and in my video interviews, I was squelched by many outlets, YouTube, Twitter. I'm talking about being taken down and suspended, getting massive violations because I dared interview people. I dared bring up questions that were questions that you had. So instead of being shut down, I kept on going. And what happened then? Then I was swatted at my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:21 a.m. I got the camera notification that there's a man with a rifle at my front door looking in the window. Turned out there were 7 sheriff's deputies that were called in because of somebody who wanted me harmed at my house. They lied and said there was some sort of peril or danger going on, and that I, Joe Pags, had been stabbed and was bleeding out. You got to get inside right now. He shot and killed my dogs. None of which was true. They were hoping to shut me up by scaring us to death and scaring my family to death, or maybe leaving me dead in my front door. So we decided, you know what? Let's push back even harder. Unshaken and Unafraid goes at those bad actors that would shut voices down that are telling the truth. And that's all we're going to do right here. This is the premiere episode of this new podcast. I hope you'll love it. I hope you'll at least like it. And I hope you'll tell other people about it. Let's get into it. Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
What happens when a former TV news anchor joins the other side and starts a campaign to tell the truth? Well, the left freaks out and does everything it can to shut him up. They swatted him. They condemned him on social media. They did everything they could to silence him. It didn't work.
Your show's a big hit. It's a big success. You do fantastically. Your ratings are great, and we're very proud of you.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
Most everybody on the planet, I think, saw her podcast with Sean Ryan. It was amazing. It was an expose on exactly how little Americans know about what's going on when it comes to terrorism around the globe and actually here at the homeland. Her name is Sarah Adams. She's a former CIA officer, also an author. The book is called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Sarah, nice to meet you. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Really amazing to have you. When I saw that, I was going, wait, how is she saying these things? And people aren't like going crazy from the government. And my first assumption was what you're saying has to be true. Did you have any trepidation about sitting down with Sean or with me or with anybody else and getting into the nitty gritty about what it is that we don't know and how high the threat is here? Any problem at all saying what you said on that podcast?
No, because we collect our own information, so it doesn't come from the government, so they can't really do much with information someone else collects and owns and puts out. And then even with our book, we put it through both the CIA review process and the Department of Defense review process.
Oh, wow.
So we did go through the former channels, yeah.
So if I recall, you were being called a CIA spotter. What does that mean? What is a spotter?
Well, I was actually a targeter. So what we would
Okay.
What we would do basically that job, right? We would spot people. It could be finding a terrorist, or it could just be finding people who had access to information and telling CIA, you need to go, recruit this person because he has something valuable that our government needs.
Okay. So when it comes to those who are watching and listening, again, we think we know what Al-Qaeda was. We think it means the base in Arabic, led by bin Laden. Were they really the Mujahideen? Were they really on our side? Did they use our weapons against us? I think that there are a lot of questions, but we know on the periphery a very general sense of who the bad guys are. Then you throw out Boko Haram, then you throw out Hamas or Hezbollah. I mean, there are so many different actors here that we kind of think we know because the media gives us piecemeal. In a very general sense, could you tell my listeners and me, what is it that we think we know as compared to what we should know or could know?
So I think the belief is that the terrorists just want us out of their lands overseas,
Right.
but that's only one step. They want that, and then they want to end, our civilization and then take over our lands. And I think the last piece really gets forgotten, and then people get confused when you talk that they're targeting the homeland. They're like, well, why are they targeting the homeland? They have Iran, they have Afghanistan, they now have Syria, they're soon going to have Somalia. And it's like, that's just a baby step to them. They have much grander plans.
And these people, we're talking about people that will take centuries to get what they want.
Correct. And the interesting part is Osama bin Laden did believe that if it takes 100 years, it's fine. His sons want to do it in their lifetime. So we do actually have a different mentality in that process and how fast they want it to go, which is a lot more dangerous.
Her name is Sarah Adams. It's Sarah with an H. Go and get her book called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. There's a line here that jumped out at me big time because it reminded me of something Obama said. Think like the enemy. When Obama was in office, he was talking about, I think, Fallujah in Iraq. And he said, hey, it's a city about the size of Charlotte, North Carolina. Sarah, there was an absolute push and drive in this country, especially under leftist leaders, to make us Americanize what was going on over there. Now, I remember flying out of an airport once, and there were some soldiers, and I said, thank you for your service. And the one guy looked at me and said, do you have any idea what it's like being in Fallujah? And I was taken aback, and we talked to him for a while. And, I mean, it's like hell on earth. It's not like Charlotte, North Carolina. Is there a reason, in your opinion, why some leaders in this country, if not all, want us to think, okay, some city in Iraq or some city in Afghanistan, some city in Yemen is just like Paducah, Kentucky, when it's not even close?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. They don't want the accountability, right, of what our troops are going into. We're not always equipping them well, and then we don't actually take care of them after. But then another thing is they really do a good job of downplaying terrorism. A lot of times it's because they have other priorities and they don't want you to spend your time and focus on terrorism. But actually, one of the things we're focusing on and telling people right now is a lot of the terrorists who are coming to the U.S. homeland have training like the terrorists had in Fallujah. And you need to go sit down with people who served in Fallujah because you've never seen those kind of terrorists here in the United States. And law enforcement actually needs to learn how to fight now that type of enemy. And they're very far behind because weren't honest about what our troops face there and the type of attackers that occurred and came at them there.
So we're told it's like an American city. We're told it's just over geography. They don't want people to occupy their lands. It's just about leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. When the reality is they're nothing like us. They're raised to hate Jews, hate Americans, so on and so forth. And they want to dominate and take over the globe. I mean, is that more like it?
Yeah, and they're never going to stop coming at us. And I think that's the part people don't understand.
So what is the basis? And again, it's not what we're being told, obviously. Again, it's Sarah Adams. Go and get her book. It's Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Follow her on X, TPA Sarah. And again, Sarah has an H. Go follow her on X right now. So what is the end goal? Again, they don't want to just be left alone. And, we want to be left alone. But again, they hate us just because we exist. What is the thought process? Either be this religion, be this whatever the ideology is, or die?
Yeah, well, they want to create an Islamic caliphate, right? The last one ended when the Ottoman Empire ended. So not that long ago, the 1940s. So they first want to reestablish that. And they got a plan right now through like 2035 or something. Then when the caliphate's reestablished and they have a big control and power, then they want to go and make like a European caliphate and an American caliphate, like a South American caliphate, etc. So their goal is like this large domination of everybody living under like their version of like a Sharia law.
Right.
So it's not just us, right? Muslims who won't live under that will also be killed or detained or all the horrible things they do, like in places like Afghanistan right now.
It's Sarah Adams, a former CIA targeting analyst, a spotter, somebody who would find a terrorist, would locate a terrorist, or also locate people that would help you in locating them. We're seeing something here in Texas where I live called Epic City. I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's a big fight right now. The governor says, the lieutenant governor says, the attorney general says, we won't allow it because obviously Sharia law cannot coexist with the Constitution of Texas nor the Constitution of the United States. So how much of that are you seeing, and how much of that is what you're calling a caliphate? Because they're pretending, no, we just want to have like-minded people. We'll have some mosques. We'll have some schools. It's all great. But then you and I know there become no-go zones. You and I know they have suddenly Sharia police show up. So how concerning is something like what we're seeing here in Texas, or maybe even in the Dearborn area of Michigan? How concerning should that be to Americans?
I think it should be concerning if you see a lot of extremist tendencies, right? If the women are forced to be covered up, if you see pro-Hamas statements, if you see money going from these communities to terrorist groups, right? Because obviously there are moderate Muslims. There are Muslims who left those countries because they don't want to live under that kind of
Yes.
law. So we have to look at those trends, right? And then realize, is this community a problem? Is this mosque a problem, et cetera, and kind of target it that way. But at the end of the day, building full communities that can only be one type of religion, I mean, is just against obviously fair housing, US laws, et cetera. So I can see just in general, you wouldn't want everybody making these pockets. I mean, we are a melting pot. That's how America is supposed to be.
Yeah. Sarah Adams, former CIA officer. She's also an author. The book is called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Let's go back to the 80s, if you don't mind. And you probably weren't even born yet. You look very young. But I remember it very clearly. The Mujahideen was, in fact, what became Al-Qaeda eventually. We joined up with them, and we defeated the Soviet Union that was infiltrating and invading Afghanistan. We did that through them in some sort of a partnership. We also propped up Saddam Hussein to take on Iran in the 8-year war. Sarah, if you could go back in time and advise the leaders of this country and of the NATO nations and so on, would you have told them don't join up with the Mujahideen because they're going to end up turning on you after they end up getting the Soviet Union out? Would you tell them don't support Saddam Hussein, let the war do what the war is going to do? I guess the broader question is, was it a mistake for us to think we could be bedfellows with somebody because the enemy of our enemy is our friend, not realizing they were going to turn it on us eventually?
Yeah, we make a lot of mistakes, especially when we're fighting Russia, that we align with the bad guys, to include at times terrorists, unfortunately. So, it wasn't just the Mujahideen era. That actually happened in Libya, too. So when the Libyan revolution happened, like, the public thinks that was like the people rising up. It was actually a large number of terrorists that got released from prison because the US government made the Gaddafi government do it. They became the base of the revolution because they were the only people trained at the time, and they led it. So when we backed the revolutionaries in Libya, we backed Al-Qaeda. And to this day,
Wow.
the government we support in Libya is still the Al-Qaeda aligned government in Libya. Now, of course, we're doing it the same in Afghanistan. We back the terrorist government. In Syria, we've now backed the terrorist government. So we're consistently making this mistake.
What should we do, though? When the Soviet Union's invading Afghanistan, just let them have it? I mean, again, I don't want to fight proxy wars anymore. I hate what's going on with Ukraine, and I'm sure you can opine about that all day. But I mean, what do we do? Just hands off? Be more isolationist? Let whatever is going to happen, happen?
Well, I think no matter what, when we ally with someone and we support someone, they should have the same ideals as us, right?
Yes.
So if
Yeah.
you're going to support a terrorist group, well, what are they going to do when they come to power? They are going to be a caliphate or Sharia law. So yeah, that's the end game of that. So I don't think you should support ever a terrorist group because you're just enabling them and you're putting them into power, right? Who's better, communists or terrorists, right? That like who both suck.
Yeah, no, exactly right.
in
For
Syria,
lack of a better term, yeah,
right?
they suck. Yeah.
So why should we pick one or the other in that situation, right? We're not helping anybody have a better life.
I think you're right. It's a really, really tough balancing act. But they had to know that these bad guys with our weapons would turn them on us eventually. Then we see 9/11 and so on. Let's talk about Benghazi. The book is called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. What I know, and I'm in the news business, what I know is that Benghazi was not what the Obama administration said it was. What I know is it wasn't about a YouTube video, because the people who live in the sticks and in the mountains there weren't watching YouTube and learning about videos. This was a concerted effort by a terrorist organization to attack the United States Embassy, and it almost appears as though we allowed it to happen. But the undertone is, was there some arms thing going on? I don't know how deep you can dive into this, but it appears that we were somehow running arms through Benghazi by way of Egypt or something else, and then we got in the middle of the crossfire, and they said, hey, let's go and attack this. You see what I mean? And I'm in the business,
yeah.
And I can't tell you what the hell happened. Can you, in a very broad sense, this is what happened, and then we can get into the minutia later if you want. But if you were to tell me, oh yeah, Benghazi happened because, is there a sentence or two you can say to make me understand it?
Sure, yeah, I'll do two pieces. So Benghazi happened because we killed a senior Libyan terrorist in Pakistan in a drone strike in June of that year. The head of Al-Qaeda at the time, that was his second deputy killed in a row, and his second deputy, he was Libyan. So he said, okay, we're going to take it to the Americans. He directed a plot in Libya that actually ended up becoming a kidnapping of the ambassador. They chose to make it in Benghazi because there's less security and it was easier to get to him. Now, the weapons has been this thing that's gone way out of control because people convoluting two things. So at the time, there was John McCain asking Congress for approvals to arm Syrian rebels, but he did not get the approval. But it was very public at the time because he kept going and giving speeches in front of Congress.
Right.
And then the U.S. government did this really dumb thing where they released a cable on Benghazi saying that there was planes stopping in Benghazi like once or twice a week with weapons and moving on to Syria. Well, they blacked out certain things, making people believe that was the U.S. government when it was actually the Qatari government doing it on their own, just like they armed the rebels during the revolution. And a lot of people filled in the blanks of what was blacked out and said that was the U.S. government, right? So there was no weapons moving through Benghazi at the time. That's always been a conspiracy theory. And John McCain did end up getting the approval to the Syrian rebels at the end of 2012. And then I think in early 2013, they did train and arm some rebels, and that ended up being a disaster. They all deflected, I think, within 2 weeks. So even that wasn't even a big effort. It was a failure.
It's Sarah Adams. Go and get this book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. It's going to be an incredible educational process because, again, what you just said about Qatar, I had no idea. I did not know that the planes were coming from Qatar, and you're right. We somehow spun that into, we had some arms trade deal going on. We couldn't save the guys in Benghazi because that would have exposed the entire thing. If I hear you right, that's not what happened. But then you got Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State in front of Congress saying, 4 dead Americans. At this point, we have no idea what happened. When she had to have known what happened, right? Was there any truth, or is this conspiracy as well, that the State Department got a request for more security and safety at that Benghazi outpost and they never got it? Is that true?
Yeah, they actually got over 600 requests since the spring until the attack. So within a 6-month period, it was an insane number of requests to increase security.
So they knew that the temperature was rising and the State Department did nothing.
Correct.
Can there be a reason? There's no way they just said take it. There's no way they were offering up this ambassador on a platter, right?
No, because remember the ambassador was at the embassy, where it was a different level of security over in Tripoli. So what the reason they made is they were actually going to close Benghazi and make a joint compound with CIA and the State Department. So State Department just ignored dealing with the building until the future when they would have a new building built. So they didn't actually make sure people were safe in the interim.
It's Sarah Adams. Get this book called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Is it available now? Is it out now?
Yeah, it's out. You can get it on Amazon.
Go and get it at TPA Sarah over on X, and Sarah's got an H at the end. How do we prevent another Benghazi? Just be more transparent? The different agencies talk to each other better? What do we have to do?
Well, we've lost a lot of our intelligence collection, which is a huge problem, right? We didn't have it in Libya to begin with. We lost 98% of our humans in Afghanistan. Obviously, the terrorist now runs Syria. Al-Qaeda is looking to overthrow Somalia. So we really have a bad base of information that we're even going off of when it comes to terrorism. So first, we got to improve collection. And then we have to be honest to the American people that we let in thousands of terrorists since 2021 into the United States. They're in your community. So you really need to make sure your law enforcement's funded well, they're getting the training they need, your family's preparing, because they are here and they aren't just here to live and go on with their lives, right? They're here to do an attack against us.
It is Sarah Adams, former CIA officer. She's an author of the book called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Let's talk quickly about that if we can. We let in millions and millions. We don't even know the number. People say it's at least 10. It could be 15 million. Who knows? Is there any way to have any accountability in your head, because you're knowledgeable on this and you're the expert on this, any idea to put a number on how many terrorists might be here? Are there Hamas outposts, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram? I mean, who's here? Do we even know?
Yeah, I mean, every group you said is here. I believe the number let in, at least since 2021, is probably about 8,000 terrorists.
8,000 terrorists living in the 50 states. Actually, probably just the 48. I doubt they're in Alaska and Hawaii, although they could be. So they come across the border. Do you have an opinion as to why? And it wasn't Biden. He was eating ice cream and taking a nap. As to why Anthony Blinken or Susan Rice or Jake Sullivan or these idiots would want to open the border and allow for that to happen. They had to know that they were letting in bad guys. We've got Chinese, nationals showing up. Oh, we took a wrong turn. We're at the military installation now. We had the Chinese balloon go overhead. We've got a bunch of people that are making enclaves of all those groups that we just mentioned. Is there a reason? And now, again, we won't agree with it, but do you know the reason why they would have wanted to allow this to happen in our country?
No, I mean, there's beliefs it was to change, obviously, voting districts, change the population numbers, which actually I think isn't a horrible theory because otherwise, if you went with the other reason, it would be they chose to harm our country, right? I mean, it's so illogical because you didn't just let terrorists in, like you said, you let drug traffickers, you let cartel members, we've let in international terrorists from a number of groups. We just picked up one of India's most wanted, right? He's a Sikh
Wow.
terrorist.
Yeah.
So it's an insane thing that they allowed to have happen. And then remember, they didn't vet these people. So it's not just people who snuck in over a border. We gave passports and visas and US residency to terrorists.
Do bad guys join up with bad guys? I mean, are they making coalitions? And here's what I mean. I know that Hamas and Hezbollah are getting along right now, but one Shia and one Sunni. They'll kill each other eventually. If they ever were able to get rid of Israel and the United States, they would kill each other. But along the lines of what you just said, we've got human trafficking, drug trafficking, we've got sex trafficking, and it's all happening by the cartels. They're making $13 billion a year, something like that, if not more. Would the cartels join up with the terrorist organizations to blow up some places here in the United States, to bring terrorism to us and scare us into hiding in our homes? Would those two organizations ever work together, and have they?
Well, we have seen at least facilitation in joint movements, right? So Al Qaeda has moved, obviously, terrorists here. A number of terrorist groups have. They have used a number of pipelines. Some are the cartel pipelines, some are the fentanyl pipelines. So that's a piece of a cartel.
Right.
China's involved, right? So they know who they moved in. They help move weapons into our country. So those type of things. Now, like you're asking too, now if we start being more operational against the cartels, will
Yeah.
they then leverage these relationships, right? To be like, hey, we could use these terrorists to go after the US to keep some of this blowback off us, right? That is definitely possible because the relationships exist. And now there's a level of trust because these cartels moved supplies into the US for the terrorists. And obviously the US did not capture or thwart any of this. So there is a level of trust we have to be very concerned about.
Sarah, were we lied to for years and years about Al Qaeda being decimated and gone? Because this entire interview, you and I have talked about Al Qaeda. I thought they were gone. I thought once you got Bin Laden, once you got the guy who set up, I can't even think of his name now, who Obama wanted to move from Guantanamo back here. Yes, Zawahiri. You've got all these people that we thought were dead or locked up or they're no longer operational. Did Al Qaeda never, ever go away wholly, or was it rebuilt from nothing to what it is today?
Yeah, so what happened is under the President Obama administration, they started the narrative Al Qaeda's on the run. And since then, it's basically been Al Qaeda's gone, Al Qaeda's decimated. Our only main threat is ISIS and now ISIS Khorasan province. So nobody wants to deal with Al Qaeda because it's a failure, right? On 9/11, Al Qaeda had 4,000 members, 8 terrorist camps. So that's it. Now, Al Qaeda has over 100,000 members and
Wow.
38 terrorist camps alone in Afghanistan, right? So people aren't admitting their fault. They're also lying about the death of 2 of Osama bin Laden's sons. They're saying his son Hamza's deceased when he's not only alive, he's leading Al Qaeda, and they're saying his son Saad bin Laden is deceased when he's actually one of the people leading their military commission who are planning these future plots against us.
So Al Qaeda is stronger than it used to be, even though we were told that it was gone. Is there a reason? I know I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, but is there a reason why Obama called ISIS ISIL? When you add the Levant instead of just Syria, that appears to be he's saying that they've got purview over, or they got control over even parts of Israel. When you say ISIS versus ISIL, am I getting into the semantics too much, or is there a purposeful reason why Obama would call them ISIL?
I really think that was more analysts being particular about where the most bodies were at the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Now it doesn't matter because ISIS has, who knows, like a dozen plus branches. But at the time, it was where the most bodies were, and it was an analytical thing, most likely. They do all those stupid things with names. I mean, just call them ISIS, just call them Al Qaeda. You know what I mean?
just call them who they are. It doesn't really matter. But it always bothered me because I felt like he was giving them credit for having geographical area over the Levant, which would include Israel and some other parts.
Right. They didn't.
It tweaked me a little bit. It's Sarah Adams. Go and follow her at TPA SARAH over on X. Get her book Benghazi. Know Thy Enemy. I appreciate all the time you've given me. I want to continue this if you don't mind, because I just think people watching right now are sitting up in their chairs and they're going, "What the hell is she talking about?" So let me ask you this: you appear to be like 25. You're a young, attractive person. How does somebody who looks like you get into the nitty gritty of the CIA and targeting people and finding out what's really going on and uncovering all of the lies that are being told and telling the truth? How does somebody go from wherever you came from to who you've become? And again, I want to point this out to everybody watching and listening. Nobody's ever questioned anything you've said in any of these appearances that you've made, so you must be telling the truth. How do you get to where you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just applied online, so that's how I got to
Really?
the CIA. Yeah, so they didn't come recruit me somewhere, like they didn't talk to me in a coffee shop.
Right.
And then a lot of people don't know, but most of the targeters are women. So when you watch Zero Dark 30, right, Maya was a woman. So it's a
Yeah.
very large base of women who are doing it. And I always joke it's because women are really good at kind of like digging up things and being stalkers, right? Like if we weren't at the CIA, we'd probably be in jail for like, you know, digging too much into people. But we're good at that, right? And good at multitasking. So
Yeah.
that skill is very helpful. My bona fides come because I had one of the most senior captures in Pakistan, and I captured the #2 of the Afghan Taliban. So that's why I kind of have a, like more of a platform in places like obviously Afghanistan, and then my Libyan investigation, of course, was done so well. So I get you know, some platforms in Libya and that
Right.
type of thing. So really it's just my work product. I'm actually much older than I look. I've been working in terrorism for over 20
Oh,
years.
wow.
So thank you for calling me young. I appreciate
Well, you're
it.
welcome. You're certainly younger than I am, but I mean, you look like you'd be my daughter, and I've got daughters that appear to be your age. Inherently, women obviously have all of what you said. I've got 5 daughters, a wife. I've got 3 sisters and a mother.
You
I get it.
it.
Yeah. No, I better know that. But having said that, is there a reason specifically that the CIA said we better go get women? Is it because of what we talked about? Is it just happenstance that most targeters are women, or is there something that women bring that men will screw up if they try to put us in those positions?
You know, it's super interesting. It's actually because the role didn't exist in the CIA, and a bunch of women basically got together and created it and started doing the work on the side of their regular jobs
Wow.
to where it became, and it mostly came out of Alex Station, which a lot of people have heard of. And so it became its own profession because they did such a good job of it on the side.
Hey, that's amazing. Again, people watching, listening, and I certainly did not consider that most would be women. I think that when we think about operations like this, we do think about men because traditionally, if you watch a movie, the CIA people are a bunch of guys. But this makes sense. I mean, you must have been so unbelievably successful. And again, I have to bring this point out. It's so important. I have to believe you because nobody's questioning you. People from authority, like you said, your book had to go through these checks and balances, all said, okay, you're good to go. Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy is the name of the book. Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. It's Sarah Adams. Will we ever stop terrorism? I know that's a broad question because now we're calling them MS-13 terrorists and Tren-Aragua terrorists. Will we stop
Yeah.
terrorism with the radical, fundamental Islamic terrorism that we know today? And the second part of that question, I think, has to be this. Shouldn't Saudi Arabia do more? That's where Mecca is. That's where that's the homeland. That's the holiest place on the planet. Are they quietly supporting any of this that's going on, or are they quietly against what's going on, but they're afraid to be outward about it?
Sure. For the first piece, we're not going to stop terrorism as long as we're actually funding big pieces of it, right? We funded Hamas. Obviously, I told you how we funded the terrorists in
Right.
Libya. We're funding the Taliban. We're now funding the terrorists in Syria. And then we obviously allow the Muslim Brotherhood to operate in the United States. And that's kind of where that big piece comes in the second part of your question, right? These countries in the Middle East should tackle Muslim Brotherhood more, but because countries like us don't even ban them, right? It's like they're almost not prioritized and they get to keep doing these things. So it's almost like like the chicken before the egg, right? Well,
Yeah.
who first goes after Muslim Brotherhood in an effective way? And I don't know if you saw just this week, Jordan blew up a huge plot that was going to happen in their country.
I did not.
And they realized it was all backed by Muslim Brotherhood, and they just banned them yesterday in their country. The U.S. still won't ban them, which is crazy because they basically are the backbone of most of this terrorism besides like Iran. Now, Saudi, as you know, has always had a trouble with these terrorists,
Right.
but Saudi has had to fight other battles, right? They've had all this problems with the attacks from Yemen into their country. So they're fighting terrorists every day, but because it's not a battle or a conflict we were focusing on, we weren't seeing that. But yes, they don't have the global strategy. But again, there's other people who should be doing more. Qatar really is the one that I would put the onus on because they're funding, training, arming. They're flying planes like they did in the Benghazi into Afghanistan now with new M4s, right? They're equipping the terrorists, and we don't do anything against Qatar because we want to have our military base there. So we actually also have to be honest about who the head of the snake is.
It's Sarah Adams. Go and get her book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Do you like what President Trump's doing when it comes to Gaza? And here's what I mean. He says we're going to make it like Trump International Gaza, or we're going to make it Trump International in the Mediterranean, or whatever it is. When in reality, it looks like a leverage play to me that he wants Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia to step up and do something. And if their input, or if they do it themselves just with his okay or with his nod, then they say you can't do what you did in Gaza again. That's ours now. Do you like what he's doing in that he's trying, it appears to me, he's trying to aggregate those countries and force them into doing something with Gaza that would be different?
Yeah, it was almost like a bait and switch, right?
Yes.
He said, we're going to do all this stuff. Like, whoa, we don't want you on the other side of our border doing that, especially Egypt, right?
Right.
So they're like, we'll step in and do it. So yeah, I think it was the right way to do it. It's obviously the most effective way to do it. You can't put Americans in there to be doing that. They're just going to be constant targets, right? So no matter what, we didn't really have a long-term plan for that. The thing I worry about, though, is, all those tunnels were under Egypt, right? Like, we're talking about countries who really haven't done the enforcement well enough, which allowed, Gaza to become what it was. So there still, I think, is going to be a problem. Jordan has its own problems, a lot of terrorists targeting them, as we just told you about the big plot, right? So they have to focus on other things too. So it's still going to be a long-term problem, which there hasn't been a really good solution for it yet. And as you've seen, there's so many sympathizers. It kind of seems like there's going to be Islamists somewhere in this government anyway, like what happened with Afghanistan. And so I just don't see an easy fix to this.
I'm jumping around all over the place because your knowledge is immense, and I want to just go a couple of different places. You mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, bad organization. They're the ones that killed Sadat, right? And they're also the ones that Obama allowed to rise up in Egypt to the point to where the Egyptian military had to knock them down, or else that country was going to be gone. Why do you think Obama did that by empowering the Muslim Brotherhood, calling it the Arab Spring, like it was going to be a big, happy, joyous occasion when it almost melted down the entire Middle East?
I really think a lot of that happened across the Arab Spring. They were so naive, thinking, oh, everyone's rising up and they want democracy. And they never spent the time to look at who was rising up and who was pushing this.
Right.
And I think it was just really bad policy, no long-term thinking. And as you know, when these new governments come in and the U.S. backed them, they get more power, they get more control. As you know, there's a lot of interest in Libya because of the money, the business interest. But remember, Gaddafi has still to this day $200 billion of his own wealth that completely disappeared. And we don't know where it went. We heard some maybe showed up at some bank in New York, but nobody has actually ever gone and seen who took his money, right? So some of these things are just pure corruption, unfortunately.
Who's running Libya today? Did we install them? Did we back them? Or is it somebody who's got terrorism ties?
Yeah, so we installed them back who's running Libya, and they have ties to Al-Qaeda. So the government's basically partially run by Al-Qaeda. Their central banks run by Al-Qaeda. And then there's an opposing force in the east, General Haftar, who wanted to work with us. We pushed him aside. So unfortunately, he only was left with the Russians. So he works with the Russians, the Wagner group. So yeah, we really messed up the policy there very bad.
Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy is the name of the book. Her name is Sarah Adams. It's TPASARAH over on X. Go and follow her right now. Same thing is happening in Syria, right? There's a guy who put on a suit and a tie who's just like a homegrown terrorist who's running the country now. And is that somebody that we backed as well to get rid of Assad?
Yeah, I don't know if we exactly backed him, but the day he threw over Assad, we all jumped on the bandwagon and said, oh, democracy. But we're lying again in that case, because obviously he had a few thousand really well-trained troops. He couldn't have taken over Syria without more. Where did he get more? Afghanistan. Who in Afghanistan? Al-Qaeda.
Ugh.
So Al-Qaeda actually provided about 3/4 of those soldiers who overthrew Syria in November. And then, like I said, pretty much the day after, we're in there meeting him. Corey Mills was there this week, right? And they're meeting with Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda's representatives. So, yeah, it's almost crazy to see, right? When you think back to 9/11, you're watching people make the same mistakes again.
You do not know what you think you know about Benghazi. Go and get her book. It's called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. It's Sarah Adams. Sarah, I appreciate all the time you've given me. Let's finish with Ukraine. Actually, before I do that, if you don't mind, can we take Bagram back? What a stupid move to give up Bagram, 400 miles away from China. It was such a great place geographically for us to contain. I mean, we could have kept it like we did Guantanamo Bay, for God's sakes. We could have kept it and said, okay, Taliban or whoever's going to run Afghanistan, whatever, leave us alone. We're keeping this base or else you don't get your country back. Can we get it back? I mean, you agree with me, it was really dumb to give it up.
Yeah, because remember, all of our near peers, Iran, China, and Russia, that is a key strategic location for them. The negative is for anyone saying we're going to walk in and take back Bagram, I think they have really missed the boat about what is happening in Afghanistan, right? Like there's over 100 terrorist camps. I only told you Al-Qaeda's number. Taliban's recruited hundreds of thousands of people to their military. And then remember, China is in Bagram. The interesting part is, this is a little gross, but the day China went into Bagram, they were actually taking swabs from the toilets and getting American soldiers' DNA.
Oh, come on.
So the whole place is completely compromised because China has been in there so long. So we also have to get the Taliban out and China out. So this isn't the easiest thing that people like, oh, we'll go take it back Bagram.
Sarah, did Biden do that for the photo op? My assumption was he wanted a photo op on the 20th anniversary where he says, got us out of Afghanistan, I ended that war. Or is it deeper and more incendiary than that? Or insidious, I should say, than that.
I think it was everyone wanted out of Afghanistan, right? Like it had been a long war. The press wouldn't report on it anymore. A lot of people wanted to be done with it. And obviously his administration did no planning. That's why they started planning an evacuation like the day before the fall, right? Because they also thought it would be easy, and they thought nobody would pay attention or care. And then, of course, this whole generation of GWAT veterans were like, whoa, I need to save the person I worked with. And then that obviously threw everything off for the administration. So I think they just were going to walk out, say it's done, like you said, have their photo op on 9/11 and just move on from Afghanistan, never talk about it again. Instead, they made the largest terrorist safe haven to ever exist in the world.
It's sick. I mean, you're right. Everybody wanted the war to end, but Trump actually had provisions in place where it would be done on our terms, and we certainly weren't leaving all our stuff there. We weren't going to leave all the assets there that they ended up killing that were helping us. The whole thing is just so sick. It's Sarah Adams. Go and get her book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Last question's got to be Ukraine. What the hell is going to happen with Ukraine? And the reason why I ask is for some reason when Crimea was taken by Russia, Obama thought that we were on the hook from the early 1990s, this memorandum that went out to send them MREs and like some sheets and blankets. For some reason, Joe Biden, owned by the oligarchs, in my opinion, was sending hundreds of billions of dollars of our money there. And now it appears that Zelensky just wants more money, doesn't necessarily want peace. We can't tell Putin, stop what you're doing and you can't have anything that you've taken, because he's not going to stop either, not going to have any peace. What is going to happen there? I mean, this whole thing, we got here because of weakness in Washington, I believe. I wonder if you agree. But we're also not getting out of it. Neither side appears to want to stop. In fact, as we do this recording, just last night there were more missile drops that killed tons of people in Ukraine by Russia. What's going to happen? Why are we here and how do we end it?
Yeah, we're here because obviously Russia saw our weakness after the fall of Afghanistan and chose that time to go in. I mean, everybody pretty much understands that piece. Now, we obviously have two leaders who believe something very different for very different reasons, right? Russia believes they have a historic stake to this area. Do
Right.
they or not? I don't know, but they were smart to do propaganda in the region for a very long time. So there also are people who live there who believe that, right? So there is
Yes.
a population who wants to be with Russia. Obviously, then Ukraine, doesn't want to give up land in their own country. As you know, you give up land once, someone comes back again, you give up more, you give up more, you give up more, right? I mean, look at what UK used to have, and now look at how small they are.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right.
that is the valid argument, right? And then there's of course the argument of what's the justice for, like, how many people have been killed, right? The
Yeah.
fact that this is really mostly affecting the civilian population. My opinion is, of course, the war needs to end. Too many innocent people are dying. Obviously, too many people have just died on both sides, right? I mean, we've decimated militaries to where people are being conscripted. I mean, criminals have come out, right?
A whole generation of Ukrainian men is gone. It's just gone. That generation doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. But it's very complicated, this diplomacy, right? Like, what are you both willing to give up to get to this point? And that's only going to be decided between two people who don't want to make that agreement together, right? So I think the faster we can do it, the better. But at the end of the day, they're both going to lose something, and it's really hard for sure to have Putin think he lost something.
Is it your belief as a former CIA person, and maybe you've got a different mindset? I'm sure you do. You're A, much smarter than I am, but B, analytically, you've got to see what's going on. Is it your opinion that we only sent money there because Biden somehow was owned by them? Had we not sent them anything, might this have ended in a very short amount of time, and maybe have those areas in Ukraine vote if they want to be part of Russia? I don't think we ever had to get here. What is your opinion as to why it? I know we were weak, I get that, but why Biden started just sending money after money after money, and he literally told Zelensky, "Don't sit down and do peace. I don't want you to have peace talks with Russia." Why?
Well, I actually think slightly different. I think we slow rolled support, which continued a war,
Okay.
and made it last longer, which is an unfortunate thing. And like you said,
To
do
help the
not
economy?
push
I
for
mean,
peace.
was it to help our economy? Because that wars help the economy.
I'm not entirely sure what it was for, but there's no one that can say we gave. If you're going to back Ukraine, and you have all these limits on what weapons you're going to give them, how quickly you're going to give them, what they can target, then you're not backing them. You're prolonging a war, right?
Wow.
And like
Yeah.
you said, you didn't have appropriate peace talks, right? So I don't think under the last administration there was an intent to end the war. Now, remember, a lot of the support from Ukraine came from two pieces. One is the people really fought and it was inspirational, right? But
Yes.
then another part that we're learning is there was paid propaganda campaigns to also get Americans invested in supporting it. And that's where I then have an issue, right? Yes, I want to support someone because they're fighting communism, sure, but don't pay actors or pay influencers to tell me what to think about this. That's when we
Yes.
get dangerous, and the propaganda is very concerning how it came out.
Sarah, they're waving Ukrainian flags in the House of Representatives. People are putting that in their profiles on X and elsewhere. You're right. This indoctrination campaign was basically, we're going to send two or $300 billion over there. Don't you love the Ukrainians? I don't want Russia to have rolled in. I wish that they would roll right back out. I wish that Ukraine would have had the ability to stop them, or better yet, maybe a strong leader like a Trump or somebody else. Maybe they never roll in to begin with. But you're right. I didn't even think about it in those terms. They were paying people, really, really big name people, and everybody else sort of jumped in line and put the Ukrainian flags in their profiles and started waving them in Congress. And to this day, Americans are very, very schizophrenic over what to think about Ukraine. We're not sure. Okay, I don't want the bad guys to keep on getting more stuff from the good guys, but I don't want the good guys to keep on dying in a war that they can't win. So short of us sending troops there, which nobody wants, how does this end?
Well, there's also one other piece that I don't think people understand that well. When they see the money that went to Ukraine, they think all the money went on the ground. And this is a problem in the US. If you need to expand your budget, if you need more money, you jump on what's hot, right? So, right now, if I ran a shop, I'd be doing southern border and bring a bunch of money in. So a bunch of pieces in the Department of Defense and other parts of the US government said, oh, we're working Ukraine now, send us the funds. So a lot of money did go into the US government and their organizations when they weren't exactly doing much to support the war effort or to make a huge effect on it. And we have to be honest too about how we move around money in that way, because it incentivizes supporting keeping something like that going.
Yes.
And we're still in that phase. Now there is some shifts and priorities, right? So obviously there'll be a shift from that money moving from that. The second money moves from that, people don't even want to do anything with it. When they started moving money from counterterrorism, you can't find anyone who wants to work it now. So that's a really interesting shift now. It's going to happen under the new administration. And another reason you really got to end the war, because like I said, if you're backing Ukraine, they're not going to have the support they need to keep a war going. And as we know, they aren't going to win in the sense of we would call a full-on win of a battlefield. So yeah, the peace is the only near-term solution.
Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. That's the book out by Sarah Adams. I appreciate all the time you've given me. Before I let you go, just maybe a quick word to those who are watching and listening. How do we identify? For a while after 9/11, it was see something, say something. Then if you saw something and said something, you were racist, Islamophobic, you were a bad guy. How dare you telling your neighbors? Just poor people going to work every day. So we were shut down for a long time to not say something. Now it appears that if we see something, say something again. What are the telltale signs that you would tell people watching and listening to realize there's something that's amiss, maybe in your neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, one would be, of course, somebody asking questions or showing too much interest in something, right? We've had a few cases where people showed up at like schools, like a school attached to a church, okay? They don't have children. They're asking about security. They're asking about the school. Why? If you don't have children, you don't go here. We have this at churches, people showing up at churches, right? Asking about it. They're not Christian, right? So these type of things need to be reported immediately because they're not normal. They're out of realm. You see any sort of ongoing surveillance. It's very strange, right? Like who would surveil a hospital?
Yeah.
Nobody, right? So there are little telltale signs like this, like, you know when something isn't normal, at least if you, like, let's say you go the same way to work every day and you start seeing something that's not normal, you know it immediately because you know what looks right and what is normal. And in those cases, feel comfortable reporting it. And also, we have intuition. People honestly can tell evil. I know it sounds crazy, but you can. I mean, I've met a lot of terrorists. They do have those blackened eyes, right? You can see through them. I had to report one that I felt was surveilling me, right?
Wow.
And of course, everyone's like, how do you know? I said, I know. I've met them, right? So if you have that hair on the back of your neck, say something, do something. Like there is a difference in habit for someone who doesn't want to make this their community, who doesn't want to stay long term, who isn't invested, right? Like those things are very clear very quickly, especially if they live in your neighborhood.
Amazing advice. Sarah Adams, Sarah with an H. Go and follow her, TPA Sarah, over on X. Get the book called Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Sarah, thanks a million for all the time you gave. Thank you for your service to our country. Hopefully we'll sell 2 billion of these books and people can educate themselves about what really happened. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That's it for this episode of Unshaken, Unafraid with Joe Pags. Make sure that you spread this around. Let everybody else go and see it. And we appreciate you. We'll see you the next time.